He thought she was just another quiet girl in the hallway, easy to mock, easy to humiliate, just another moment of power for the school's most feared bully. But in one split second, everything changed. Because the girl he chose was the wrong one. What happened next didn't just shock the entire school. It exposed the truth about strength, silence, and the courage to stand tall when no one expects you to. High school hallways are always alive with a rhythm of their own, footsteps echoing, lockers slamming shut, and voices rising in waves of excitement, dread, or drama. At Eastwood High, the energy was no different. Every morning a tide of students flowed through its corridors, bustling with chatter and the unspoken rules of teenage hierarchy. Among the students, one name seemed to hover like a cloud over the school grounds: Derek D. Rex Monroe. Tall for his age, with a loud voice and sharper tongue, Derek carried himself with the confidence of someone who believed the world owed him respect, or at least submission. Most students gave him a wide berth. His presence was like static in the air, unsettling, always on edge. His reign wasn't built on physical violence so much as fear. Derek was a master of intimidation. He cracked jokes that cut too deep, pulled pranks that veered into humiliation, and knew exactly how to twist a moment to his advantage. Teachers saw the surface, a smart, if somewhat arrogant boy. But his peers? They saw the shadow he cast, and most avoided crossing his path, that is, until Ava Chen arrived. Ava transferred to Eastwood High in the middle of junior year. She was quiet, not shy, just focused. With sharp features and observant eyes, she seemed to move with a kind of composed awareness, like a person always listening. Ava was neither flashy nor loud. She wore simple clothes, carried herself with grace, and didn't react much to the swirl of drama that surrounded her new environment. It didn't take long for Derek to notice her. It happened one Thursday morning. The school bell had just rung, and the hallways buzzed as students rushed to their next classes. Derek stood with his usual crew, leaning against the lockers with the casual arrogance of someone who believed the world was his stage. He laughed at some joke, then glanced up, and there she was. Ava walked with her head held high, earbuds in, expression unreadable. She wasn't trying to be noticed, but that made her all the more visible. Derek smirked. "Check her out," he said, nudging one of his friends. "New girl thinks she's royalty." The others laughed. "She hasn't said a word to anyone all week," someone chimed in. "She thinks she's better than us," Derek added. "Let's see if she's got a sense of humor." His words were casual, like a challenge to himself, more than anyone else. Before anyone could stop him or even process his intent, Derek pushed off from the wall and strode toward Ava. She didn't notice him at first, focused on her music. Then she caught the movement in her periphery, and paused. Derek stepped right into her path, forcing her to stop. She pulled out one earbud, eyes calm. "Hey," he said, his tone playful but edged. "You new here?" She gave a polite nod. "Yes." He grinned. "Cool. Just wanted to say hi." Then, without warning, he reached for her backpack strap and tugged it slightly. "You dropped your smile somewhere. Want me to help find it?" A few chuckles echoed from behind him. Ava didn't flinch. She simply raised an eyebrow, her voice low but steady. "You always touch people without asking?" That got a few murmurs. Derek's smile faltered for half a second. Just long enough for her to notice. Then, in an ill-timed attempt to reassert control of the moment, he laughed and made a showy gesture, mimicking a playful lift of her coat hem like a silly dance move. "Relax, just having some fun." That was the mistake. In a blink, Ava stepped back, not in retreat, but to gain distance. Her posture shifted. Her right foot slid slightly behind her left, her shoulders squared, her eyes narrowed, not in fear but focus. Anyone watching closely might have thought she was about to take a test or throw a punch. She didn't shout, she didn't threaten. Instead, her movement was calm and controlled. With practiced swiftness, she grabbed Derek's wrist mid-gesture, twisted it just enough to send a wave of discomfort, not pain, just surprise, through his arm, and stepped sideways to unbalance him slightly. It happened so fast that he had no time to react. The grip wasn't violent, it was efficient, like something born from hours of repetition. Derek stumbled, not enough to fall, but enough to lose the smirk. Ava looked him in the eye and spoke with quiet precision. Next time you try to have fun, make sure the other person's invited. She let go, stepping back with a fluid motion. Silence. The hallway, which had grown quiet during the encounter, now buzzed with stunned whispers. Derek, face flushed and jaw clenched, looked like he wanted to speak, but found no words. His friends, for once, had nothing to say. No one laughed, no one cheered, just watching. Ava slid her earbud back in and walked past him as if nothing had happened. By lunchtime, the story had spread. Derek got checked by the new girl. She's a black belt or something. She did some ninja move. The rumors grew more outrageous with each retelling, but one fact remained. Derek had finally met someone who didn't flinch, and the school felt different that day. By Friday morning, the hallways of Eastwood High hummed with a different frequency. There was no announcement, no written notice posted on the bulletin board, and yet something unspoken had changed. The usual roar of pre-class chatter was punctuated with glances, sideways nods, and conversations that lowered into whispers the moment Ava Chen passed by. She noticed the shift, but not in the way others might. Ava wasn't one to bask in attention. She moved through the corridors like water through stone, gentle, steady, impossible to stop. She had not intended to make a statement. She hadn't set out to teach a lesson. She had simply defended her boundaries with the instincts and discipline carved into her by years of relentless training, failure, and resilience. What most people didn't know was that Ava hadn't always been strong. Her calmness was learned, her poise earned through a journey riddled with its own shadows. 4 years earlier, back in the small town of Westdale, where Ava had grown up, she was once the opposite of what people saw now. She had been soft-spoken, uncertain, constantly walking the tightrope of trying not to stand out, and yet desperate to be seen. At age 12, she had been the favorite target of a trio of older girls who found entertainment in tearing down anyone. Too quiet to fight back, her lunches were stolen, her drawings she loved to sketch birds were shredded and tossed like confetti. When she once found a pair of shoes stuffed with yogurt, something inside her broke, not out of rage but weariness. She came home that day, kicked off her ruined sneakers, and sat silently in the kitchen until her mother noticed. "I want to learn to fight," she said without emotion. Her mother, May, a widow and nurse who had immigrated to the US when Ava was a baby, paused in the middle of chopping vegetables. "Fighting doesn't make you strong, Ava." "I don't want to fight people," Ava replied. "I want to stop feeling like this." That night, May enrolled her in a self-defense class. It wasn't fancy, just a modest studio above a laundromat, run by an old coach named Mr. Dale, who spoke more with his silences than his words. He had a limp, wore worn-out tracksuits, and taught with a sharpness that demanded attention. "Strength isn't how hard you hit," he told the class on Ava's first day. "It's how calmly you stand before someone trying to break you." Ava didn't get good quickly. She stumbled through drills, got knocked down in sparring, cried in the bathroom twice during her first month. But she kept going, because for the first time, she wasn't invisible. She trained through middle school and into early high school. Not for revenge, not even to face those old bullies who eventually faded into the background. She trained because each hour in that studio stitched her back together, punch by punch, breath by breath. Back to Eastwood High now, at 17, Ava had a quiet certainty to her. She didn't need to prove anything. She simply walked with the knowledge that she was enough. That kind of peace unsettled people. especially those like Derek Monroe, who had built their confidence by shaking others. Derek didn't show up to school that Friday. When he returned on Monday, the swagger was there, but fainter. His usual corner by the lockers felt less like a throne and more like a stage he no longer believed in. His friends cracked jokes, but the laughs didn't land quite the same. Something had cracked, and for the first time in years, Derek noticed what it felt like to be the one watched. He passed Ava in the hallway. She didn't acknowledge him, didn't gloat. She simply looked ahead, listening to her music, fully at ease. He felt an unfamiliar emotion, shame. 3 days later, it was raining, the kind of steady drizzle that soaked into your shoes and made everything smell like wet concrete and earth. Ava sat under the covered bench near the old gym during lunch, sketchbook open, pencil moving in quiet. Derek approached slowly, hands in pockets. "You always sit here?" he asked. She didn't look up. "Only when it rains." He stood awkwardly. "You drawing?" A pause. Then she flipped the page so he could see. A peregrine falcon mid-dive, wings slicing the wind. Every feather was etched with sharp detail. "It's incredible," he said before he could stop himself. She glanced up, surprised not by the compliment but the tone. It sounded genuine. Derek exhaled and sat beside her, not too close. He rubbed the back of his neck. "Listen, about the other day." Ava waited. I was out of line," he said finally. "I thought it was funny, but it wasn't. I guess I didn't know who I was messing with." Her voice was calm. "You don't need to know who someone is to treat them with respect." He nodded, face tight. "I know. I just—" His words got caught somewhere between guilt and pride. "I've always been like this, loud, in control. I don't even know why." Ava looked at him for a long moment. "Control is a shield. People who yell the loudest are usually the ones who feel the smallest inside." That landed harder than he expected, not in a mocking way, just honest. He laughed bitterly. "Guess I've been walking around wearing a mask." "Most people are," she said, returning to her sketch. Change begins. Small after that day, Derek didn't become perfect overnight. He still joked too hard, still interrupted people, but something had shifted. He started asking questions instead of assuming answers. He started watching, learning. He didn't shrink, he just began to grow in a different direction. A week later, a freshman dropped his tray in the cafeteria. Food splattered, laughter echoed. Before anyone could react, Derek stood up and helped the kid pick up every item. No words, no performance, just action. People noticed. And Ava? She kept sketching, training, walking with that same unshakable quiet. She didn't need applause. She was never trying to win. She just lived in truth. The air felt different that spring, not just because the cherry trees near the school gate had begun to bloom, or that finals loomed quietly in the background, but because something had shifted in the culture of Eastwood High. A current of awareness, of cautious self-reflection, moved through the halls in ways few could articulate, but most could feel. It started quietly. Ava never tried to change anything, and maybe that's why everything changed. She still walked to school with her earbuds in, her steps measured, her expression unreadable. She still sat in the back of the library during study period, sketching birds of prey in the margins of her notebooks. But those who had once looked past her now glanced twice. Not because she demanded attention, but because she had taught the school something without ever giving a speech. Even now, weeks after the incident with Derek, people still whispered about that moment. Not because of the confrontation itself, but because of what followed. Derek hadn't retaliated. He hadn't doubled down. He had, to the surprise of everyone, including himself, changed. It wasn't instant. He didn't become a model student or a perfect friend, but his edges were dulling. His tone softened, and with every step he took away from the role he had once played, others began to question their own. A junior named Casey, once known for snide remarks that made timid classmates flinch, stopped interrupting others in class. A group of seniors who always laughed when someone was left out of a game in gym started inviting others to join. These were small things, quiet things, but they rippled outward like stones dropped into still water. The teachers noticed too. Mr. Alpin, who taught government and often struggled to control his class, told the faculty at lunch one day, "I don't know what's going on, but the air in my room's just easier lately. Like someone turned down the static." No one mentioned Ava's name, but many thought of her, even Derek. For him, the weeks after his fall from grace were uncomfortable in ways he hadn't anticipated. His friends, at least the ones who had clung to his bravado, grew distant. They didn't know what to do with a version of Derek who didn't mock others or laugh at cruel jokes. One even told him flatly, "You've gone soft, man." But Derek didn't snap back. He just nodded slowly, then walked away. Soft? Maybe. But for the first time, he could sleep without the tight knot in his chest that came from pretending to be someone he wasn't. For the first time, he could look someone in the eye, especially someone smaller, quieter, different, and not see them as a prop in his story, but as a person. That shift, painful as it was, brought something he hadn't known he was missing: peace. It was Ava who gave it to him, though she never meant to. She'd simply done what he'd never had the courage to do: be herself, without fear of judgment. On a Thursday afternoon in late April, as school let out beneath a pale sky, Derek found himself walking past the gym. He glanced toward the side building where wrestling mats were stored, and paused. Ava stood there, hands wrapped in cloth, shadow boxing alone. Her movements were fluid, sharp strikes balanced by a dancer's grace. She pivoted on her heel, ducked low, jabbed forward and turned, lost in the rhythm of discipline. There was a beauty to it, not flashy, not performative. It was something private, sacred even. Like watching a tree bend in the wind without ever breaking. Derek didn't approach. He just stood still, humbled by the realization that real strength had nothing to do with who was watching. Later that week, the school hosted its annual community night. Students presented projects, artwork, performances. Ava had submitted a piece to the art exhibit, a large canvas displayed in the center of the gymnasium, showing a falcon bursting through a cage made of hands. Some of the hands reached in fear, others in anger, but the falcon wasn't attacking. It was soaring, free, unbothered, whole. Parents stopped to admire it. Teachers lingered longer than usual. And students, especially the ones who'd once felt like background noise in their own lives, saw something of themselves in it. Derek stood in front of the painting for a long time. He didn't need to read the small card underneath that said, "Untitled AC." He knew who had painted it. He turned, and there she was, standing quietly by the punch table with a paper cup in hand. He approached her, hands in his pockets, unsure of what to say. "I saw your painting," he said. Ava nodded. "It's powerful," he added, scratching the back of his head. "Like you." She looked at him thoughtfully. "Everyone's powerful. Most just don't realize it until they're tested." Derek smiled, a little awkwardly. "I think I'm still figuring that out." "Most of us are," she replied. "The important part is trying." They didn't say much after that, just stood side by side for a while, watching the room swirl with laughter and color. In the days that followed, Derek started showing up early to help Coach Wallace set up for morning PE. He volunteered to tutor a freshman in history. He asked Ava once, quietly, if she'd show him some basic footwork. She agreed, not because he needed to learn to fight, but because he needed to learn control, patience, humility. She taught him in silence, just as she had trained herself. A month later, on the last week of school, Derek passed a note to Ava in homeroom. It was short, written in uneven but honest handwriting. "Thank you for showing me how not to be afraid of myself." She folded the note once, placed it in her notebook, and nodded without a word. That summer, as students went their separate ways, Ava continued to train, sketch, and build the kind of life that didn't rely on applause. Derek, too, stepped into unfamiliar but promising territory, joining a local youth group, signing up for a leadership workshop, slowly letting go of the boy he used to be. No one put up a banner or made a documentary about what happened at Eastwood High that year. But those who were there remembered. They remembered how a quiet girl in black sneakers had changed everything without shouting. They remembered how one act of courage echoed far beyond a single moment. And most of all, they remembered the feeling that strength didn't always roar. Sometimes it walked past you in the hallway, head held high, earbuds in, leaving behind the quiet promise that anyone could rise.